top-tier Yoh that crests over a hill looks a bit like who knows what.
Well, Water Tanks Reddit had some suggestions. Hello, we've been waiting to reach you about your extended warranty. That was from Demise74, and also, yeah, how can you not have some prequel memes going into this? You see what these three on the ridge line, what do? I guess suggesting just how annoying the new Yoh Tanks could end up being. Credit to 99 Destroyer for that absolute masterpiece. But it wasn't only the top tier Yoh Tanks that I got to talk all about yesterday. Also, Wargaming are quick to put in a tier 8 premium tank. Obviously the one that's going to be getting them all of the cash. This is the M4Y, and luckily Wargaming have given us, the community contributors, the statistics so we can actually take a look to see what probably the first vehicle that you'll get to play of the new Yoh line will be like. And in true QuickyBaby fashion, of course, I had to put everything onto an Excel spreadsheet so we can do a direct comparison to a bunch of other tier 8 American heavy tanks. So before that, let's just re-watch what Wargaming showed about the M4Y yesterday so we can get an idea of how the armor will play out. You can see, as Wargaming showed, it's a very cylindrical kind of front. They're suggesting that the hull armor is going to be similar to a T110E5. Yeah, this is a tier 8 premium heavy tank after all. And just take a look at the way that this turret is shaped. Wargaming were quick to add that it will have a weak point on top that you're going to have to watch out for. As we can see here, big weak point on top, lower plate awful as well, upper hull pretty good. But the turret armor will be very thick, and it will be just as good from the side as it will be from the front. If you're using your gun depression, your weak point underneath the gun will not be exposed, but if you're not, then you're going to have to watch out for that. So now we can go and take a deep look into the statistics of the M4Y to see how it stacks up to the T32, the T34, and the Renegade. Now, if I had to compare the M4Y to those three tanks, firstly, let me give my opinion about the T32 and the T34 and the Renegade. The T34, it's not fast. It's got a very dependable gun. It doesn't have the DPM. It's all right. The Renegade, that's probably the best one of the bunch. And the T32, well, it's a tech tree tank, so it doesn't usually stack up compared to its premium counterpart. But it's no slouch, especially since Wargaming buffed the vehicle. So now that you have an idea of how the other three vehicles hold up in the meta, I'd say the Renegade is probably one of the better tier 8 premium heavy tanks in the game. If the M4Y can get anywhere near the Renegade, then it will be a very decent vehicle at that. Alright, so first off, the M4Y will have a 105mm caliber gun with 360 alpha damage, a lot like you would see on the Renegade. However, the penetration is a little bit lower than the Renegade, but significantly lower than the T34, but at least it's better than the abysmal penetration on the T32, with the M4Y having 218mm of penetration. If you thought that loading the gold on this tank was going to help you, it will a little bit. You're getting an extra 29mm of penetration, but it's definitely not a lot. 247 is not great for a tier 8 premium tank in 2021. It would have been very good back in the day. And if you want to have extra pen, then you really want to play the T34. However, the Renegade does do pretty well with 255mm of pen. So all in all, it kind of feels like a Renegade gun, but just a little bit worse with regards to the penetration. But when we take a look at the rate of fire that this tank has at 5.31 rounds a minute, and also I'd like to clarify that everything is subject to change. Characteristics are not final, as Wargaming will want me to highlight, and the statistics could get better, the statistics could get worse, depending on how the vehicle does in the super test. The damage per minute, consequently, with that 360 alpha is 1,911. It's not bad, but again, it's not great for 2021, with significantly worse damage per minute than the T32 using the 105mm caliber gun, and a good 200 damage per minute worse off than the Renegade, as that vehicle is literally firing half a round a minute more than the M4Y. So if you were thinking these vehicles were going to be damage per minute lords, it doesn't look like that is going to be the case. One thing I'd like to clarify, and as I mentioned in the video yesterday, that these new Yoh tanks are already in the game on Blitz, although they're going to be slightly different there. On Blitz, I believe that they have 2-round autoloaders, a bit like the Czechoslovakian heavies that we have. It's very interesting to see how World of Tanks PC, World of Tanks console, and World of Tanks Blitz are changing the way that they release all of the content. It's far too much to try and keep up with Blitz and console. I definitely want to just focus on PC, but it's always good to hear the comments from the Blitz players, as I saw in the video yesterday. So your opinions are definitely welcome. All of your experiences with the Yoh tanks. After you watch the statistics of this one, maybe you can try and draw some conclusions as well. All of that would be great to hear from you in the comments down below. It's just really interesting to see how Wargaming are kind of mix-matching the release between all of their 3 big versions of World of Tanks across all of your different platforms. Okay, so now onto the gun handling for the M4Y, and we can see that the 0.4 accuracy of this vehicle is not very good at all. That's the same as the T32, significantly worse than the T34, and 0.02, which is a good amount worse than the Renegade. The aim time as well of 2.5 seconds is the same as the Renegade, worse than the T32, but massively better than the T34. These vehicles are going to have lovely depression angles. 10 degrees will mean that you can work a ridgeline like an absolute boss, and that's going to be very useful for when you're trying to hide that weak point that will be underneath the gun of the tank, almost as if it's kind of like a mouth or if it's some kind of a neck of the vehicle. And you should probably go for the neck, right? Turret traverse, practically the same as the Renegade, better than the T32 and the T34. And this is the interesting statistics that Wargaming have actually provided us, which usually we don't get to see from a super test, and that is that we have dispersion values. 0.17 when moving, slightly worse than the Renegade, but 0.08 when turning the turret, that's slightly better than the Renegade. And when we take into account that this vehicle has a good turret traverse speed, the gun handling on this tank should be fantastic, and it's arguable about whether you will need vertical stabilizers, at least on this premium tank. And now that there are better pieces of equipment on the game, and obviously with the idea of having the backup tracks on this tank, the reserve tracks to keep you mobile, there's a lot more flexibility that you could do with the equipment on this, maybe even the durability module to give the tracks more health so that they don't even come off, and when they're repaired, they're fully repaired. That could be fabulous on this vehicle. And dropping vertical stabilizers, maybe to even pump up the mobility of this vehicle with a turbo, could be very nice. Okay, so now on to mobility. How fast will the Yoh tanks be? Well, this one's going to have 850 horsepower, and it weighs just under 47 tons, meaning it's going to have an 18.1 power to weight ratio. That's incredibly fast, and it always alarms me when we see incredible power to weight ratios like this on heavy tanks that even a medium tank would like to have. Do we really need more and more and more heavy tanks in the game that are just as fast as the slower medium tanks of old? And if anyone wonders why the game is getting faster and faster and faster, it is moves like this by Wargaming, especially when you can take that very good power to weight ratio of 18 and be able to max up the top speed limit with the turbo probably easily on this vehicle. You're going to consistently be able to keep up to that 47 kilometer an hour top speed limit when you manage to unlock the field mods on this tank and have an extra turbo slot. This means that the M4Y has a much better power to weight ratio than the Renegade, although its top speed is more limited, forwards at 42 and backwards at 14, but that is by no means slow, especially when we compare it to the T32, which goes at 35, and the T34, which goes at 12 backwards. The hull traverse on this vehicle is always also really nice at 41, meaning that this tank will be very agile and able to re-engage its opponents, irrelevant of what direction they are. One thing that's also nice that we have from Wargaming is that we have the ground resistances as well. 1.4 on hard, 1.7 on medium, and 3.4 on soft is actually really bad, and it will balance out that power to weight ratio and the traverse speed of this tank. But I should also keep in mind that that's the same as the Renegade, and so this vehicle will just be like a Renegade with more mobility. And the Renegade is already a very fast, heavy tank to boot. Okay, so now let's take a look at the armor of the M4Y. 177 on the front of the hull is the thickest in this comparison, and as Wargaming compared it to the T125 against equal and lower tier tanks, nobody's going to consistently go through your frontal hull armor. When you angle to the side, if it's anything like a T125, it's going to have a boat-shaped hull, a lot like the Renegade, which is why those tanks do so well even when you're over-angling them. And it's why the T32 and the T34 just can't compare with regards to the hull armor. Rear armor on the hull, yeah, you're not going to want to get shot there. Even HE rounds will be able to go through, but at least it's a little bit better than the Renegade. Turret armor-wise, 279 on the front is very similar to the T34, and apart from the weak point that you're going to have on the top, I do expect that the turret armor will be fabulous. Apart from against, I believe, like Tier 9 and Tier 10 high-explosive anti-tank rounds. Those are going to obliterate this vehicle and go through it very easily indeed from any angle that they're going to be shooting it. The side armor, however, at 241 means that you can over-angle this thing's turret against equal and lower tier tanks, and once again, it's going to require tier 9, some tier 8, and all tier 10 tanks to really load the gold to be able to go through even the side armor of this vehicle. It will be a very solid tank inside a nice matchup, but I do think that it's probably going to just be a little bit more undergunned and under-armored for those top tier matchups where they're going to just be able to obliterate all of the armor of the vehicle. Passing mention should be made on this vehicle's horrible rear armor of 38, meaning that really high explosive rounds are going to be able to go through pretty much every single time at the back of the turret. If, of course, you miss that huge amount of the side turret armor that comes all the way around the back. All 4 of these vehicles have 1,500 hit points, very, very normal for tier 8 heavy tanks. But there's one thing that I really don't like about this tank, and that is the 380 meters view range. This is significantly worse than the Renegade's 400, which means that unless you take coated optics on this tank, even if you have a very good crew and you're using a premium consumable, you're not really going to get up to that magical 445 meters view range that will at least always be useful. It always sucks when you manage to only get up to about 430, and that will leave this thing quite blind at decent distances, which is always disappointing for a vehicle which has a lot of mobility and you think that you want to try and advance to be able to get into position quickly against your opponents and then try and spot out those mediums and those light tanks. What else is there to say about this vehicle? It has a very standard crew loadout of a commander, a driver, a gunner, and a loader, so it looks like it's going to be good for all of your American heavy tank needs for crew training. And the shells, armor piercing, armor APCR, and high explosive, about as generic as it gets. And so that really is all there is to say about the M4Y, at least the initial statistics that we have of the tank. I think that the vehicle is going to be very good inside a nice matchup, although it will have a weak point on top of the turret that you're going to have to watch out for. I can't really see this thing being outrageously overpowered, apart from against maybe some tier 6 and tier 7 tanks that don't stand a chance of being able to go through this thing's hull armor. But I think the bottom line is that unless Wargaming massively buffed the statistics of this vehicle, apart from it having that extra set of tracks that we can see at the back that allows it to keep moving, I don't think this thing will end up being as good as the Renegade. What I love about the Renegade is the top speed limit. What I love about the Renegade is that raw DPM. What I love about the Renegade is enough view range, even on my free-to-play account, where I can use vents and I don't have to use coated optics. Those are all things that the M4Y will not have, which suggests that this thing, apart from its mobility and apart from probably against tier 6 and tier 7 tanks that practically have no chance of being able to handle it, I think this thing is going to be, all in all, pretty balanced, and as it stands, at least slightly worse than the Renegade. So good job by Wargaming, I feel, by trying to balance this tank. But again, we're just going to have to wait and see how much of an impact those reserve tracks have on the gameplay of this tank, which really is something that you can't quantify with numbers. The ability for a heavy tank to keep chugging along after its front tracks have been removed is immensely powerful. And we'll just have to see what Wargaming have to do with all of the changes with the M4Y and how they're going to balance out that feature before I can have my final word, hopefully get my hands on the tank and be able to get a review for all of you. And so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed this little sneak peek at an M4Y. Let me know in the comments what you think about the statistics. And also, you might notice that I've got a few improvements with regards to the microphone. I've got one of my Rode microphones back again. Hopefully that's going to be a little bit easier on the ears. Talking about easier on the ears, I also got myself a new Audio-Technica headset that is incredibly comfy. And it's also open, so I can control my voice better. It's really important for me to have like an open headset so I can be able to hear myself, not because I like the sound of my own voice, because otherwise I'm getting too loud, and then that's going to make me a little bit hoarse at the end of the day. And also, can I say how much I really liked all of your comments about the washing machine? Yeah, for anyone who didn't see my video last Sunday, I'm in Belarus. I'm staying in my mother-in-law's house here, and I've got a whole streaming setup because I'm going to be here for a few weeks, and then maybe like a couple of times a year that I'm going to be here, and it's not going to stop me from being able to get you all of those YouTube videos. So I'd just like to say a massive thank you to all of you out there who occasionally watch a few of the adverts on this YouTube channel. Thank you very much. People who have either bought one of my QuickyBaby t-shirts that you can find on Teesprings down below, or even the few of you who are also members of the channel and spend a little bit of cash each month. I really appreciate it, and I'm investing it back into my setup so that I can continue to make content even when I'm away, supposedly on holiday. But don't worry, I am chilling out. I'm having a real good time, and just having the energy of Tanya's family around me is just absolutely awesome. Having an awesome time here. So yeah, have a lovely weekend, whatever you get up to. I'm going to be streaming the entire weekend on this setup, and I've got drops also all weekend as well. So come along. Maybe I'll blow up a few tanks. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get to play this one, even though I'd quite like to. Have a lovely time, whatever you get up to, ladies and gents. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.